The violet dawn of Vela 9 crept over the jagged horizon, spilling across the remote outpost repair bay like spilled wine. Leora Cross wiped a streak of engine grease from her forehead, inadvertently adding another smudge to her already dirt-stained overalls. At 20, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had grown up among the whirring and humming of machinery. Though beneath that exterior lay a weight she rarely acknowledged, the shadow of her father's legacy. The repair bay doors groaned open, letting in a gust of frontier dust that danced in the shafts of purple-tinged light. 5 years had passed since her father's mysterious death during a particularly complex repair job on a diplomatic vessel, and the whispers still followed her around the outpost. Legend status was a difficult mantle to inherit, especially when the shop was now failing under mounting debts. Leora's mother Mara appeared at her side, her once nimble hands now gnarled from years of handling corrosive fluids and heavy tools. "Another quiet morning," she murmured, the lines around her eyes deepening. "If we don't get a major contract soon..." The words hung unfinished in the dusty air. They both knew what it meant. 3 more months, maybe 4, before they'd have to sell the shop that had been in their family for generations. The first human-owned repair bay on Vela 9, once celebrated for innovation, now struggling in an economy increasingly dominated by automated corporate facilities. The calm morning shattered as alarms blared across the outpost. An emergency landing notification. Leora rushed to the bay's observation deck, squinting at the approaching vessel. Its sleek silhouette was unmistakable. A Celestia-class yacht, the kind only the wealthiest beings in the galaxy could afford. But something was wrong. The ship's starboard stabilizers flickered erratically, and the distinctive blue-green glow of a properly functioning grav drive was instead a sickly yellow. "It's going to crash if it doesn't correct that descent vector," Leora muttered, reaching for the outpost's emergency comms. Before she could broadcast, the ship made a stomach-turning lurch, then somehow righted itself enough to make a rough, screeching landing on the outpost's main pad. The sound of tortured metal echoed across the valley, sending indigenous avians scattering into the violet sky. Leora and Mara raced toward the landing pad, portable diagnostic equipment in hand. As they approached, the yacht's main hatch hissed open, releasing a cloud of sweet-smelling vapor, an atmosphere regulator working overtime to compensate for something. From within the mist emerged a tall, slender figure whose skin shimmered with an opalescent quality unique to the Trivar species. His eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a perfect triangle, blinked in rapid succession, adjusting to Vela 9's particular light spectrum. Behind him followed 4 attendants, each wearing the distinctive metallic fabric that marked them as servants to Trivar nobility. "Which of you pathetic creatures is in charge of this facility?" The Trivar's voice resonated with the peculiar harmonic quality of his species, managing to sound melodious and contemptuous simultaneously. Mara stepped forward. "I am Mara Cross, proprietor of Cross Mechanics. This is my daughter and chief engineer, Leora." The Trivar's upper eye swiveled to focus on Leora, while his lower pair remained fixed on Mara. It was disconcerting. That divided attention, a biological trait that had served the Trivars well in diplomatic negotiations across the galaxy. "I am Zenrik Xylon of the Cressida Moons. My yacht has experienced a most inconvenient malfunction, and I require immediate repairs." He gestured dismissively toward the smoking vessel. "I was assured there was a repair facility on this. What is it again? Vela something." "Vela 9, Leora corrected, already scanning the yacht with her handheld diagnostic tool. "And your grav drive is severely compromised. The biofusion reactor is showing..." "Spare me your primitive analysis," Xylon interrupted, his third eye now swiveling to take in the modest repair bay behind them. "I find it hard to believe that a human facility on a frontier world could possibly understand, let alone repair, a Celestia-class propulsion system." Leora felt her cheeks flush but kept her focus on the readings. Something was very wrong with the yacht's systems. Wrong in a way that standard diagnostics weren't fully capturing. There was a dissonance in the energy patterns, like listening to a symphony where one instrument was deliberately playing in the wrong key. "Your biofusion reactor's harmonic stabilizer is out of phase," she said, looking up. "But there's something else. The diagnostics are showing contradictory." Xylorn made a sound that might have been a laugh, though it felt more like a dismissal. "A human female in dirty overalls presumes to diagnose a Trivar-designed propulsion system? How charmingly primitive." He turned to his entourage, who tittered appreciatively. "Next, she'll suggest fixing it with a hammer and some duct tape." The outpost's other inhabitants had begun to gather at a respectful distance, drawn by the unusual sight of a luxury yacht and its noble owner. Leora was acutely aware of their presence, of how this interaction would become outpost gossip within hours. "I can fix your ship," she said firmly, though inside her confidence wavered. She had studied biofusion systems extensively, but mostly in theory. Her father would have known exactly what to do. "Can you?" Xylorn's three eyes focused on her now, a rare gesture that indicated either intense interest or extreme condescension. "Let me propose something amusing. A wager of sorts." The crowd murmured. Trivar nobles were known for their extravagant bets, often with life-changing stakes. "I will give you..." Xylorn paused dramatically. 26 hours to repair my yacht. If you succeed, which, let me be clear, I consider astronomically improbable, I will pay you 10 times your standard fee." Mara stepped forward. "That's generous, but..." "I wasn't finished," Xylorn continued. "If you fail, you will publicly acknowledge the superiority of Trivar engineering and the limitations of human capabilities." Leora's hands tightened around her diagnostic tool. The payment would save their shop, but the terms felt designed to humiliate. Xylorn's eyes gleamed as he added, "In fact, I'm feeling particularly confident. If you somehow manage to repair my yacht within 26 hours, I'll transfer ownership of one of my smaller holdings to your establishment. Perhaps my manufacturing facility on Theros Prime." A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Theros Prime was an industrial powerhouse. Even a small facility there would be worth millions. "And if I fail?" Leora asked, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. "Then this quaint little shop becomes my newest acquisition. I've been looking for a convenient stopover point in this sector." Xylorn's smile revealed teeth that gleamed like polished titanium. "Do we have an agreement?" Mara grabbed Leora's arm. "We need to discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," Leora said, her eyes locked on Xylorn. The diagnostic readings troubled her. There was something deliberately wrong with the yacht's systems, something that didn't match any failure pattern she'd ever studied. But her family's legacy and livelihood hung in the balance. "I accept your terms." Xylorn's attendants produced a contract tablet, the terms already entered. Biometric signatures were exchanged, and the wager was set. With a flourish, Xylorn announced to the gathered crowd, "Witness this historic moment. The primitive human female will attempt to comprehend technology beyond her species' collective intelligence. The countdown begins now." As the Trivar noble and his entourage moved to secure accommodations in the outpost's modest luxury quarters, Leora turned to her mother, whose face had gone pale. "We could lose everything," Mara whispered. "Your father would never have accepted such terms without a thorough pre-inspection." Leora swallowed hard. "Dad isn't here, and we're losing everything anyway. Just more slowly. At least this way we have a chance." She glanced at the yacht, sunlight gleaming off its polished hull. "I need to get started. Can you gather all the specialized tools from the back storage? And call Jax and Thierry. I'm going to need help." As Mara hurried away, Leora approached the Celestia-class vessel, trying to ignore the weight of the gathering crowd's stares. 26 hours to solve a problem that might be beyond her capabilities. 26 hours to save or lose her family's legacy. The yacht's interior was a testament to extravagance. Walls lined with materials so rare they were practically mythical. Atmospheric controls that adjusted to create the perfect microclimate for each occupant. But Leora had no time to marvel. She made her way directly to the engine room, a space that under normal circumstances would have been restricted to only the most trusted engineers. The biofusion reactor dominated the center of the room, a marvel of engineering that combined organic computing with quantum mechanics. Under normal operation, it would pulse with a gentle blue-green light. Now it flickered yellow and orange, occasionally spiking into angry red. Leora set up her diagnostic array, connecting sensors to key points around the reactor. The ship's own diagnostic system was top of the line. Yet somehow it had failed to identify the critical issue. That, more than anything, heightened her suspicion that something wasn't right. The door hissed open behind her, and she turned to find Jax and Thierry entering cautiously. Barely 18, the pair had been apprenticing at Cross Mechanics for less than a year. They looked at the reactor with wide-eyed wonder. "Is it true?" Jax asked, his voice hushed. "You bet the whole shop on fixing a Trivar noble's yacht?" "News travels fast," Leora muttered, turning back to her work. "I need you both to focus. Thierry, start a comprehensive scan of the biofusion matrix. Jax, check all the physical connections to the grav drive. There's something wrong here that the standard diagnostics aren't catching." As they set to work, Leora immersed herself in the reactor's programming, peeling back layers of code looking for anomalies. 3 hours passed in concentrated silence, broken only by the beeping of equipment and occasional murmured observations. "Found something," Thierry called out eventually. "There's a microfracture in the emitter array, but it's weird. The material shouldn't be able to fracture like that. It's like it was deliberately scored." Leora moved to examine Thierry's findings. The young apprentice was right. The fracture pattern was too precise to be accidental. "Sabotage," she whispered. "Why would someone sabotage a Trivar noble's yacht?" Jax asked, looking up from his inspection of the grav drive connections. "That's practically suicide." "Maybe not if you're another Trivar," Leora mused. "Politics among the noble houses are notoriously cutthroat." She turned the problem over in her mind. But that doesn't explain why the ship's self-diagnostic and repair systems didn't catch this. A vessel this advanced should have been able to compensate for a simple microfracture. She returned to the control console, diving deeper into the system architecture. Another hour passed before she found it, a subtle subroutine buried in the reactor's control protocols. Not only had the emitter been physically sabotaged, but the diagnostic system had been programmed to ignore it. "This is deliberate," she announced. "Someone wanted this yacht to fail, but not catastrophically, just enough to strand Xylorn somewhere remote." "Like Vela 9, Jax said slowly. Leora nodded. "The question is, was this a prank, an inconvenience, or the prelude to something worse?" As if in answer, a proximity alarm blared from the console, a security breach at the main hatch. Leora brought up the internal cameras to see 2 of Xylorn's attendants entering the yacht. Nothing unusual about that, except for the furtive way they moved, constantly checking over their shoulders. "Keep working," she told Jax and Thierry. "I'm going to see what our guests are up to." Moving silently through the yacht's corridors, Leora tracked the attendants to a secure storage compartment near the bridge. They were attempting to override the lock, but clearly struggling with the security protocols. "Can I help you find something?" Leora asked loudly, causing both Trivars to startle visibly. "We are retrieving personal items for our master," the taller one said smoothly, but his third eye darted nervously to the side, a Trivar tell for deception that Leora's father had taught her to recognize. "Of course," she replied, "but this section requires engineering clearance. Since I'm currently responsible for the yacht's systems, I'll need to accompany you." The attendants exchanged glances. "That won't be necessary," the shorter one said. "We have master override codes." "Which don't seem to be working," Leora observed. "Interesting, given that true master codes would open any compartment on the vessel, unless, of course, those aren't actually Xylorn's codes." The taller attendant's hand moved to his waist, where Leora noticed the subtle bulge of a concealed weapon. "You should return to your repairs. Human, this doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does," Leora countered, taking a calculated risk. "Because I've already discovered the sabotage to the reactor and the modified diagnostic protocols. What I haven't figured out yet is whether you're working for a rival noble house or if this is part of a coup within Xylorn's own hierarchy." The attendants froze, their three eyes blinking rapidly in the Trivar equivalent of shock. Then the taller one lunged forward, weapon now drawn. But Leora was prepared. She slammed her palm against an emergency panel on the wall, triggering the yacht's internal security system. Force fields sprang to life, isolating each corridor section. "Security breach detected," announced the yacht's AI in a pleasant, melodious voice that seemed entirely inappropriate for the situation. "Containment protocols engaged." Trapped in separate sections of the corridor, Leora and the two attendants stared at each other through the shimmering barrier of the force field. "You've made a serious mistake," the taller attendant hissed. "Do you have any idea who we represent?" "I'm guessing not Zenrik Xylorn," Leora replied, tapping commands into a nearby console to alert outpost security. "And I'm very interested to hear who it actually is." Within minutes, the outpost's security chief arrived with 3 officers. The attendants were taken into custody, protesting loudly about diplomatic immunity. Leora returned to the engine room, where Jax and Thierry were still working, blissfully unaware of the drama that had unfolded. "Did you find anything else?" she asked them, deciding not to mention the security incident until she understood more about what was happening. "The grav drive is completely dependent on the reactor's output," Jax reported. "If we can fix the reactor, the drive should restore itself to normal function." Thierry nodded agreement. "But the micro-phased emitter is custom manufactured. There's no way to replicate it with the equipment we have here." Leora considered this. "Maybe we don't need to replicate it exactly. My father used to say that the principles of energy are universal, even if the components differ." She thought for a moment. "We could fabricate an analog matrix that redirects the energy flow around the damaged section." "An analog solution for a digital problem?" Jax looked skeptical. "The tolerances would have to be perfect." "Then we'll make them perfect," Leora said firmly. "Let's get back to the shop. We have less than 20 hours left." When they informed Xylorn that they needed to return to the repair bay to fabricate a replacement component, the Trivar noble insisted on accompanying them, along with his 2 remaining attendants. News of the security incident had reached him, and though he maintained a haughty exterior, Leora noticed a new wariness in his triangular gaze. The Cross Mechanics workshop was a stark contrast to the gleaming interior of the Celestia yacht. Tools of various ages lined the walls, some so antique they would be considered museum pieces elsewhere, but each had been maintained with meticulous care, a testament to the Cross family's reverence for their craft. Leora moved with purpose, gathering materials and firing up the fabrication forge, another antique, but one whose precision had never been matched by its more modern counterparts. Xylorn watched with barely concealed disdain. "You intend to repair my yacht's biofusion reactor with hand tools?" he asked incredulously. "Not just any hand tools," Leora replied without looking up from her work. "Tools that have fixed everything from ancient combustion engines to experimental warp drives. My father used to say that understanding the soul of a machine matters more than the sophistication of your diagnostic equipment." "Machines don't have souls," Xylorn scoffed. Leora finally looked up at him. "With respect, Zenrik Xylorn, That attitude might be why your yacht was so easily sabotaged. A ripple of shock passed across the Trivar's opalescent features. You found evidence of deliberate tampering? The reactor's microphased emitter was physically damaged, and the diagnostic systems were programmed to ignore it. Leora returned to her work, carefully measuring a sheet of alloy. A machine with proper maintenance builds a relationship with its caretaker. Discrepancies stand out because you know how it's supposed to sing. Xylon was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted subtly. My chief engineer made a similar observation once. I dismissed it as sentimentality. Where is your chief engineer now? Leora asked. Retired. At my insistence. Xylon's 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Leora couldn't quite interpret. Perhaps prematurely. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of intense focus. Leora, Jax, and Thierry worked in coordinated precision, fabricating a complex analog matrix that would bypass the damaged emitter and restore harmony to the biofusion reactor. Mara managed logistics, ensuring they had materials, food, and the occasional stimulant beverage to keep them alert. As word spread about the high-stakes repair and the dramatic arrest of the saboteurs, a crowd began to gather outside the shop. Some came to gawk at the Trivar noble, others to witness what might be the last hours of the cross-family business, and a few, mostly fellow mechanics and engineers, to offer moral support. Xylon remained throughout, his initial condescension gradually giving way to reluctant interest as he watched Leora's methodical approach. He asked occasional questions that revealed a deeper understanding of engineering principles than he had initially let on. With less than an hour remaining before the deadline, Leora held up the completed matrix, a beautiful, complex latticework of metals and crystalline elements that gleamed in the workshop lights. "It's ready," she announced, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Let's get it installed." The procession back to the landing pad had taken on a festival-like atmosphere. Nearly everyone from the outpost had turned out to witness the conclusion of the wager. Some enterprising souls had even set up a betting pool on the outcome. Inside the yacht's engine room, Leora carefully removed the damaged emitter and prepared to install her handcrafted replacement. Her hands were steady despite her fatigue and the pressure of the moment. "Even if this works," Xylon observed from where he stood at a careful distance, "it won't be a permanent solution. The matrix will degrade over time. It'll get you to the nearest major shipyard for proper repairs." Leora replied, "And it should last at least a few thousand light years if the harmonics are properly balanced." "If," Xylon emphasized. Leora didn't respond. Instead, she gently lowered the matrix into position, her movements slow and deliberate. A wrong angle or too much pressure could shatter the crystalline elements, rendering hours of work useless. Jax and Thierry watched with held breath, while Mara murmured what might have been a prayer to distant engineering deities. With the matrix in place, Leora began the delicate process of connecting it to the reactor's systems. Each connection had to be perfect. Energy would flow through these pathways at near light speeds once activated. "Final connection," she announced, reaching for the last coupling. As she did, the ship lurched suddenly, an atmospheric disturbance outside, perhaps, or someone bumping against the hull in the crowd. Leora's hand slipped, and for one heart-stopping moment, it seemed the entire matrix would be dislodged. But her reflexes, honed by years of precision work, saved the moment. She steadied the matrix with one hand, while completing the connection with the other. A drop of sweat fell from her brow onto the reactor housing, sizzling instantly into vapor. "Connections complete," she said, carefully withdrawing her hands. Now for the moment of truth. The crowd outside had gone silent, the tension palpable even through the yacht's hull. Inside, Xylon's remaining attendants had edged closer, their usual composure replaced by genuine curiosity. Leora moved to the control console and initiated the reactor startup sequence. Lights flickered across the panels as the system began its diagnostic checks. Everyone held their breath as the progression bar filled agonizingly slowly. The reactor hummed to life, its glow shifting from sickly yellow to a faint blue, then blue-green, then the full, healthy azure of a properly functioning biofusion core. "Primary reactor online and stable," announced the yacht's AI. "Grav drive restoration commencing." On the external cameras, they could see the gathered crowd's reaction as the yacht's stabilizers lit up with their characteristic glow. A cheer went up, followed by the chaotic movement of people collecting or paying on their bets. "It's working," Thierry whispered in awe. But Leora kept her eyes on the readings. "Not quite done yet. The real test is thrusters." She initiated the thruster test sequence, a standard procedure that would fire each thruster in sequence at minimal power. If the grav drive was truly restored, they would ignite in perfect harmony. The first thruster fired with a soft blue flame, then the second, then all around the ship. Each thruster came online in flawless sequence, their gentle roar audible even inside the engine room. The yacht lifted a few centimeters off its landing struts, hovering with rock-steady stability before settling back down. "All systems nominal," the AI reported cheerfully. "Celestia-class yacht Astral Harmony, ready for departure." Leora exhaled slowly, releasing tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She turned to face Xylorn, whose three eyes were wide with what might have been, impossible as it seemed, respect. "Your yacht is repaired. Zenrik Xylorn," she said formally, with 23 minutes to spare. The Trivar noble was speechless for perhaps the first time in his privileged life. He approached the reactor, studying the handcrafted matrix with all three eyes focused intently. "Impossible," he murmured finally. "The computational complexity required to design an analog bypass for a quantum state emitter, and to fabricate it by hand." "Not impossible," Leora corrected gently. "Just a different approach. Sometimes the old ways and the new can complement each other." Xylorn turned to face her, his opalescent skin shifting through colors that Leora couldn't interpret. "I believe," he said slowly, "that I owe you a manufacturing facility on Theros Prime, outside." The crowd had begun to chant Leora's name, the sound penetrating even the yacht's soundproofed hull. It was a moment of triumph that should have felt complete, perfect. Yet Leora felt a strange emptiness alongside her pride. "Before we conclude our business," she said, "I'd like to know who sabotaged your yacht and why they chose our outpost." Xylorn's colors settled into a more controlled pattern. "The security chief informs me they're agents of House Vrenath, a rival noble house with whom we've had disagreements. As for why here," he gestured around them. "A remote outpost with limited security and a repair shop they assumed would be incapable of fixing the damage. I would be stranded just long enough for certain political maneuvers to be completed in my absence." Leora nodded. It made sense. "And now?" "Now I return to make my displeasure known," Xylorn said, a hint of the predator beneath his civilized veneer showing through. "But first, our wager." He produced the contract tablet again. "The facility on Theros Prime, as agreed. Unless, Leora prompted when he didn't continue, "unless you would prefer a different arrangement. Your skills are exceptional. I could use someone with your perspective among my engineering staff. The position would come with considerable status and resources." It was a tempting offer. Access to technology beyond what most humans ever saw. Wealth, status, and the chance to work on the most advanced vessels in the galaxy. Everything an ambitious young engineer could dream of. Mara stepped forward. "That's very generous, but—" "Mom," Leora interrupted gently, "let me handle this." She turned back to Xylorn. "I'm honored by your offer. Truly. But this shop, this outpost, they're my home, More importantly, they're my father's legacy. Xylorn's eyes blinked in sequence again, that gesture she couldn't quite read. Your loyalty to family is admirable, if somewhat limiting. It doesn't have to be limiting, Leora said, an idea forming. What if, instead of me joining your staff or simply taking ownership of a facility I have no connection to, we formed a partnership? Partnership? The concept seemed foreign to the Trivar noble. Between a Zenrik and a repair shop proprietor? Between two entities that could benefit from each other's strengths? Leora countered. You need innovation, the kind that comes from hands-on experience and unconventional thinking. We need resources and connections. Xylorn considered this. What specifically do you propose? Transform Cross Mechanics into an interstellar training hub. Use your resources to upgrade our facilities and bring in students from across the frontier worlds. In return, you get first access to the innovations we develop and a percentage of any patents. A Trivar-sponsored engineering academy on a human frontier world, Xylorn mused. It would certainly be unprecedented. Unprecedented is where innovation happens, Leora said. My father used to say that the future is built in the places everyone else overlooks. For a long moment, Xylorn was silent, his three eyes moving independently as if examining the proposal from multiple angles simultaneously. Finally, they synchronized again, focusing on Leora. Your father sounds like an unusually wise human, he said. I find myself curious about what other wisdom he might have imparted to you. He extended a slender, six-fingered hand. I accept your proposal, Leora Cross. Let us create something unprecedented together. As they shook hands, human and Trivar, mechanic and noble, the yacht's reactor hummed in perfect harmony, its blue-green light casting them both in the glow of possibility. Outside, the violet dusk of Vela 9 was settling over the outpost, painting the repair bay in hues of possibility. The crowd had dispersed, returning to their daily lives with a new story to tell, of the day a human mechanic's daughter left a Trivar noble speechless and changed the course of their remote outpost forever. The next morning, as official documents were being prepared for the new partnership, Leora took a moment alone in her father's old office. A holographic image of him smiled down from the wall, captured in mid-laugh during happier times, his hand stained with engine grease not unlike her own. I think you'd approve, Dad, she said quietly to the image. It's not quite the legacy you planned, but it's a good one. She thought she could almost hear his voice in the gentle hum of the machinery around her. The best repairs often lead to upgrades, kiddo. Outside, Mara was already sketching expansion plans with Jax and Thierry, their excitement palpable. Xylorn stood slightly apart, still awkward in this human environment, but making a visible effort to engage. His remaining attendants looked scandalized by their master's new association, but they would adapt or be replaced by those who could. Leora joined them, ready to build something that neither human ingenuity nor Trivar resources could create alone. Something unprecedented, born from a broken ship and a daring wager beneath the violet skies of a frontier world called Vela 9.